Hi, I'm Abigail Tyrrell from RavenDreams Luxury Plus Size Lingerie, and this is Tips and Tricks. Okay, we're talking about lace and how to use lace in underwear. So anyway, this is a piece of lace that I have that's just extra. It came from something else, and I want to be able to use as much of it as possible. So what I have is I'm going to be using it for, I've got the modern pattern here, which I've put into acetate so that I can see through the pattern piece to be able to see what kind of, where I would get a motif out of, where would be the best use of my fabric. So I've got the modern piece here, and if I were to align it along the top to where it might, hit at the waistband, and then I can see if I can fit all of this or most of this motif into it. And the answer is no, because my pieces come outside of the fabric. So I'm going to flip it over and see if I can get what I can use out of this side. So I can get part of a motif either way, or I could get bits of the motif here. I can try and move it down the fabric to where I have at the edges to see how much of this motif I could get into it. And that's kind of okay, but you can see that we're getting a kind of a framing effect, and that will be a framing effect around the vag, which might be nice, it might not be nice. And we're getting little bits of the top in, which may or may not be desirable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this version, which is the vintage, and again, we can't use it this way because it's too much. And we're going to turn it around and see, yep, there we have it on the edge to edge, and I can get all of that motif in. I can move it down a little bit, and because I put the center line in, I can see exactly where I need to align it up to see, okay, where am I going to get this piece out of? So this is good because I can cut, I'm right on the edge of here, so I want to push it up a little bit further, see if I can get as much out of it as possible. So now I have this full circle, this diamond, and both of that wave and flowers into it. And when I cut along, these bits here have very little sequins or beading, so it will make it much easier to remove those before I start sewing. And this is ideal, so I'm going to cut this out, and I'm going to use the vintage mid-rise panty pattern. I have cut out my pattern pieces, and I've laid out my lace to see how it's going to look, and then I've also cut out a bunch of the motifs from the remaining lace and laid them out to see how I might use them. So I put two of the flowers here at the top, where there might be a bare spot, and some of the smaller flowers on the side so I can extend the lace going outwards, and then just a bit of cuteness at the back. The next thing you need to do is transfer your bits of lace to your fabric, and I use this stuff. I mean, spray stick stuff, repositional fabric spray. It's fantastic. You can then pin it afterwards, but frankly, all of this, oh, you have to do so much, and I don't have the time for all that shit. I really just don't. So what you do is you give it a good shake, and then just make sure that you've got a piece of paper that you don't really care all that much about, and give it a good glue. You need to let it dry a bit. Make sure you do it on the right side that you're trying to stick it to. And seriously, give it at least 30 seconds to dry, otherwise it's too wet and too sticky and really horrible. Here I have one of my side pieces, and I'm going to start to play with it and decide what I want to do and where I want things to go. So I've got these tiny motifs in purple. And I know that I only have so many of them, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start thinking, do I want it up, do I want it down? These are just tacky. They're not completely wet. So when I place them, they're going to stick, but you're also going to need to maybe hold them down with a pin when you start to sew. But at least it gives you the ability to go, where do I want it? So I want something more like here. And see, it's right there. It's ready to sew. And then you have, I'm going to take a larger red one, taking off the here, Do I want it the same direction? Do I want it not the same direction? Where do I want to try to put it? I'm going to put it there. I'm going to see and play around with the distribution. And if I don't like it, I'm going to go like, you know what? I'm going to have it over here instead. And it still sticks. Yay! So when you move something, you don't have to go, oh my god, everything's gone everywhere, I've got pins everywhere. You can just start playing with it. Because they really do stick down, you can begin to sew right away. You can see that I've stuck down, but they are not entirely and completely, you know, stuck down onto the fabric, my motifs. They're just enough to keep them there for as long as I need it to. It's not completely glued, it's just tacked on. And what I've done is I'm using this clear monofilament both in the bobbin and on the main seam, and I am using, if you are on a Janome, the stitch length is 2 and the stitch width is 2 and the stitch length is 2.5. So I'm going quite narrow but also quite long. What I'm trying to do is tack around the edges and get this thing down. I'm not trying to sew it down hard. I'm trying to make sure that it's there permanently. Now a lot of companies don't do this. They don't stitch anything down, or if they do, they use they hand sew it on with big long stitches in between, and that's not going to keep it on your underwear any kind of washing length. So using a monofilament, using this clear thread is the way to go, and doing it loosely is good. Now you're going to want to work really slow and lift your foot and turn the fabric every chance you get. So we're kind of there. We're at the point, I don't know if you can see it, we're at a joint of a leaf. So we're going to go a little bit in and take a stitch. Then we're going to turn it and take a stitch and look and see where we are. We want to turn it a little bit like that. Take a stitch, turn it again. Look, we're trying to keep it as flat as possible. You're not stretching anything. And you're being really careful about how you're doing this. Taking your time is the real key. Those of you who have machine embroidery feet and know how to use them really well, or a sewing machine that does machine embroidery, this is going to be just a piece of poo for you. But for people like me who don't do this all the time, take it slow. Watch what you're doing. Be prepared with your seam ripper to undo all your hard work. So here we go, going around. I know kind of where this is going, but I'm going to look underneath. Yep, I want to go out a little bit. I'm going to lift it again. I'm going to get to that point on the leaf there. Again, it's just a stitch at a time. It is a bit fiddly, but it depends on what you're trying to do as well. And if this is small and tiny, and I'm just showing that you can do it, and you can do it well. You don't have to be a massive pro who's been to, no, that's too far, to school to do this. You can do it on your own. Just take your time. And what do they say? Practice, practice, practice. Okay, I have my pieces cut out for the vintage panties, and I've done my applique and I've dealt with my lace. So what I've got here is the side bits and the back. and the front. As you can see, I'm using a bit of lace that is tulle based. Now tulle does stretch. It does have a bit of stretch to it, but what it also is incredibly delicate. It's strong in some senses, but it can be ripped. It can get, you know, torn quite easily if you're not paying attention to what you're doing. So having it alone on itself is very pretty, and I'll be doing some work with tulle that I do just that in the future. But for right now, if you want a durable pair of knickers that you can hand down to others as, you know, kind of vintage, proper vintage lingerie for the future as well, you really want to back it. So I'm using this power net, which I love, which is really soft and silky and stretches and is incredibly durable and partially see-through. So it's still going to be really sexy, but it's going to give this tulle a really lovely firm backing that's going to protect it over time. Mouse, come. Come, Mouse. Sit, Mouse. Mouse, come. Sit. Sit. Mouse, sit. Sit. Good girl.